Hello, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. I would love to be able to do that in multiple other languages. And though I have been learning basic level French, I do not think a recorded session is my time to shine to bust out those skills. My name is Alexandra Moya, and first and foremost, I just wanted to take a moment to sincerely thank you for taking time out of your day to watch the session on English language development. English learners are a group of students that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And I just so greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day so that you can learn how to further support them. Some pertinent information about me is I myself am an English language learner. So I am born and raised in Globe, Arizona, Arizona native, and I come from a predominantly Spanish speaking household. And by predominantly, I mean Spanish only speaking household. So whenever I entered kindergarten many years ago, and I first entered that classroom, I had no idea what was going on. Funny enough, it's also very common in some Spanish-speaking households that they call you by a nickname. And I remember I had first learned my name in kindergarten because my mom wrote my name on my pencil box, and my teacher was letting me know, Alexandra is your name, not Janita. Groundbreaking for me. But as an English language learner myself, I do recall overcoming multiple challenges. But one of the biggest ones was language development and overcoming that language barrier. So not only was I supposed to overcome the language barrier and acquire the same amount of language as my non-ELD peers, but I was also expected to learn content at the same rate as them. And if you think about it, it's a pretty daunting task to put on a young child that's not only trying to overcome cultural challenges, but also linguistic ones. I am also a very proud first generation bachelor's and master's graduate. I'm the first person in my family to have acquired either degree. I have my bachelor's in elementary education, I have my master's in education, and my two prime areas of focus were bilingual and global education. I've spent 7 amazing years in the field of education. I started off as an elementary school teacher and in a variety of different contexts too. I taught many different things. And now I am my district's English language development specialist. One of the most proud accomplishments that I currently hold is I am a national board certified teacher. I certified in 2025 as a early childhood generalist. And a fun fact about me is I taught English in Spain every summer for about 7 years. Now, if you are new to teaching, if you are new to working with ELs, if you need a refresher on how to best support your ELs, this session is intentionally designed to make things feel clear and more manageable. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on what English language development instruction actually looks like in Arizona classrooms and what that means for you. So, my goals by the end of the session is that you are able to walk away with a clear understanding of how Arizona supports English learners, and more importantly, what you can do in your classroom right away. Now, this session is not about memorizing systems. It's going to be more about building your confidence and having a few practical tools that you can implement immediately in your classroom. If you click the link at the bottom or type in that into your browser, you will have a copy of this entire slide deck with all the hyperlinks included in there. So, if you are in a classroom, if you are going to be in a classroom, there's a good chance you already have English language learners in that setting. Now, English learners are one of the fastest growing student populations in the state of Arizona. I believe the ratio right now is 1 to 10, meaning 1 out of every 10 students is an English learner. Now, that varies depending on the school you are in. If you come to my district, it's actually 1 in 3, meaning 1 in every 3 students is going to be an English language learner. And they are going to be present in every classroom you teach. Now, even if you are not completely sure who these students are yet, as a teacher, you are responsible for 3 key things. First, making sure that these students have access to grade level content. Second, supporting their language development. And third, creating equitable learning opportunities for the student. Now, you are not by any means expected to be an expert, but you are expected to support them and know how you can support them. So, who are your English learners? Your English learners are students who are learning English as an additional language. Now, The key term in that sentence is additional language. You will absolutely have some kiddos that have a very strong understanding of English, but it's not, and it could be their predominant language, but they are exposed to another language in their household. Now, these students have been identified through the state assessment that's called the AZELA. And after we receive their test scores back from the AZELA, these are students that receive specialized language support based on their proficiency level. So after the AZELA results come back, we usually see an overall level of proficiency, which is either pre-emergent, emergent, basic, or intermediate. And we also see where that student falls in language domains of speaking, reading, writing, and listening. Now, we may also have some students that test proficient, but those kiddos are no longer labeled as English learners because they've tested proficient, and those students are out of the program. Now, most important is to remember that these students bring so many valuable assets to your classroom. They will bring linguistic, cultural assets, and it is important to know that these students bring what they have with them, and most often than not, they never start from zero. So, in the state of Arizona, you will hear the term SEI or structured English immersion often. Now, at its core, structured English immersion simply means that we are intentionally teaching students English. We are not just expecting them to pick it up on their own. And this is a really beautiful area where instruction and legal responsibility do come together. And today, we're going to focus on seeing what that actually looks like when it is put into practice. So, there are many different ways that schools organize the level of support they provide for their English learners. You may see pull-out models. You may see 2-hour blocks. You may see newcomer programs, or you may see other structures depending on the school. And it's important to note that models do vary by school depending on their student population, their EL population, and the amount of staffing that they have accessible. So let's take a look at a table that I made for you all. It is going to be under the TAPS table, and it is listed Arizona Structured English Immersion, what this looks like in real classroom, so in real application. Now, let's take a look at the first model, which is the pull-out model. Now, in this specific model, students receive 60 minutes if you're in elementary, 50 minutes if you are in secondary or above, of targeted explicit language instruction for part of their day, and then they spend the rest of their day in general education and integrated instruction settings. Now, what matters for you is how this impacts your reality and what your expectations are going to be when you enter a school that has the pull-out model. Now, if you are a teacher who has acquired their structured English immersion endorsement or their bilingual certificate, know that it may be a reality of yours that you provide that targeted explicit instruction for your student for that part of the day. If you are not the ELD teacher, it's important for you to know that students may miss part of your block while they are receiving explicit language instruction with an ELD teacher. It's also important to know that coordination with an English language development teacher is going to be a key responsibility that you have. Only difference between a 2-hour model is going to be the amount of minutes that students receive that targeted explicit instruction. In a 2-hour model, they'll receive 120 minutes if they are in an elementary setting, 100 minutes if they are in secondary or above setting, and it's pretty much the same. They receive their group by proficiency levels, and they spend the rest of their remaining day in grade level classes with their peers. The newcomer model is going to be for our kiddos that come brand new to us. And the important part to remember about that specific model is that they receive a lot of their targeted and integrated instruction in an EL setting for the majority of their day. And these classrooms can be very taxing on them. These students, if they do transition into your classroom, be ready for limited English language proficiency and a need for visuals, model, and structure talk. Now, If your school provides the 50-50 dual language immersion model, it's important to know that this is not an SEI model, but your school has received explicit permission from the Arizona Department of Education to provide this model to their students. Oftentimes, students are learning in two languages, and the degree of how many of each language they're learning will differ depending on the grade level they're at. Now, the two bottom parts right here are very important. A push-in model is something you may hear frequently as you're out and about in the field. Now, it's important to know that this is site-based support. It is not a standalone model. It's a support structure. So in these situations, your ELs will either stay in your classroom and an ELD specialist will push in to support during instruction. Now, it can be very easy if you have this model to solely rely on that ELD teacher, but it's still important that you plan language objectives and supports for those students. And then finally, on the bottom row, you'll see it says hybrid or site-based model, and it's important to know that schools can combine models if they'd like. So if a school wants to combine two models, they could do the pull-out model for their basic or intermediate students who require less support, but take it up a notch and give the 2-hour model to their students who are pre-emergent emergent, who require extra support. Now, it's important to notate that you do not have to memorize this or memorize the models. You just have to understand what happens at your specific site, which is what you're going to do next. Now, at this point, I really want you to shift from listening to actually applying this into your own context. So one of the handouts I made you is called Your SEI Scavenger Hunt, Knowing Your School and Knowing Your Role. And the main purpose of this handout is for you to get to know how your school supports English learners and what that means for you as their teacher. So the first thing you have to identify is what kind of model your school uses. Now, this information is usually public, so if you go to your website, your school website, you should be able to find something based on the model that your school is using. It's also important to know what this looks like in practice at your school. So when do your students receive ELD? When do they leave class? Who's the one that's going to be teaching that? And most importantly, is knowing your role in this model. So at this school for the SEI program, are you the targeted ELD teacher? Are you the content teacher that supports ELs? Or are you not sure yet? And if you're not sure yet, who can you ask? Based on the role that you select, it will change what you are responsible for. Are you going to be responsible teaching and posting language objectives? Are you going to be responsible for incorporating sentence frames or stems? Is that an expectation of you? And is collaborating with the ELD teacher an expectation of you? These are all important things that you need to know, as well as knowing who's going to support you if you have any questions at your site. Who are the ELD teachers that you can ask? Who are the coaches? Who are the administration? And finally, some tips for success. If you are ever unsure about any of these answers, you can always start with an English language development teacher at the site. You can also start with your instructional coach, your principals, and your APs, because it is important to know that you are not expected to know everything, but you are expected to be able to find out. And more importantly, just to be clear, you are not expected to know all of this right now because it is something that you will be able to figure out over time. Now, one of the most important ideas of this session, because it is one of the most common areas of confusion, is the difference between content instruction versus integrated or English language development instruction. Now, content instruction at its core is what students are learning in these core content areas, such as math, science, ELA, social studies, and your special areas. English language development instruction shifts the focus to the language that students need to be able to understand and explain that content. So let's take a look at a specific math example. This teacher is teaching word problems, and the word problem she is teaching is Max traveled 366 miles in 61 days. How many miles did he travel on average each day? Now, from a content perspective, you are expecting the students to calculate unit rates. And some of the skills that they need to be able to calculate unit rates are going to be problem-solving skills and being able to successfully put the math problem or use the equation they need to answer that problem. Now, if you are looking at this from an English language development instructional lens, you know that the first thing that you're going to start with is making sure the students understand the words that are inside of the problem. So one of the main focuses you go towards first is defining vocabulary. You will absolutely have some English learners that don't understand what the word traveled means. And you have to be able to explain to them that travels means from going to point A to point B using visuals, gesturing, whatever you have in your toolbox to make sure that that student understands what that word means. Another word that can cause trouble for your EL students is average, because within multiple contexts, average can mean something different at each moment. So being able to define what average means within the context of this word problem is going to be incredibly important for your ELs to successfully understand what it is that they need to be able to answer. Now, both are completely necessary for English language learners to succeed because you will often get some English learners who do understand the content but don't have the language that they need to express it. Or you're going to have some students that don't understand the language, and because they can't access the language, they can't access the content. They both go hand in hand. Now, I created a nifty handout for you guys called ELD versus content. And this really labels the key differences between English language development instruction and content instruction and how they differ. Now, you do not need to memorize this, but it is something you can come back to when you are planning. The key areas that you can pay attention to in this moment are going to be objective types and teacher roles and student talk. So, looking at objective types, biggest differences between content instruction and or content instruction objectives and language instruction objectives is going to be the focus. So, where the content objective is going to be focusing on the skill students need to be able to access the content or demonstrate proficiency, the language objective is going to be more so focused on how students use language to be able to access the content or to be able to produce the language to demonstrate proficiency with that specific area. If you look at student talk, whenever you are looking at it from a content instructional lens, your main purpose is going to be supporting discussions with think, pair, share, or guided responses. Now, it differs because whenever you are focusing on English language development instruction, it's going to be more structured and intentional. It's going to have that incorporation of sentence stems, of partner talk, and repetition. The teacher role will also change. Whenever you are looking at what your role is as a content instructional teacher, you know that you are focused on teaching that content first and foremost with embedded language supports. As the language teacher, your focus is going to be on modeling grammar, syntax, and vocabulary use. Now, language domains. There are 4 language domains that students need to be able to demonstrate proficiency in to demonstrate that they are proficient in English. Those 4 domains include listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Now, within these domains, you will be able to see where they lie and their proficiency levels on these other results. But it's important to know that they are distinguished by the skill that the students need to be able to use this language within the context. So let me give you an explanation. Listening and reading are going to be receptive communication skills, how students receive information. Speaking and writing are going to be productive communications skills, how students produce communication. Now, you will have some students that are going to be very good speakers, but they lack in some of the other areas of domains. And those are the areas that we need to really focus on so that we can have students improve their language proficiency. And this is where language objectives will come into play. Now, if you take one strategy from this session, let it be this. Language objectives. They do not have to be complicated. They are simply answering these 2 questions. What language are the students learning, and how will they use it? So let's take a look at our language stems. This is a language objective STEM tool. It is a supportive tool. Best thing about it is you do not have to create it from scratch because I created it for you. Now, this resource's main purpose is to help you differentiate language expectations based on the student's proficiency. in the specific domains while still teaching the same content. So let's take a look. Proficiency levels we have are labeled as pre-emergent, basic, and intermediate. Now, your pre-emergent emergent kiddos are the students that need high levels of support. These are your kiddos that need visuals, repetition, and can produce simple sentences. So, let's say you want these students to be able to practice their speaking domain and you are trying to reinforce practice with that domain. These are your kiddos that are able to name using pictures and they are able to say a sentence, simple sentence, using a sentence frame. If you wanted to help these students improve their listening domain, you are going to be able to produce listening stimuli and have students point to if they hear it or simply follow directions. Reading is going to be similar. You can have students match words to pictures and identify key vocabulary. And then finally, writing, these students are able to currently label some pictures and complete sentences using a sentence frame. Now, your students who are basic require a moderate level of support. What they require to be successful are going to be sentence frames, and you are going to focus on expanding the language for these kiddos. So, for these kiddos, let's say that you want to help them focus on a listening domain, right? These students are able to identify the main idea. You provide that listening stimuli, and then they identify the main idea. They're also able to answer questions from details using text. Moving on to your intermediate kiddos. These are your students who need less support and more independence with practicing academic language. So oftentimes your intermediate kiddos are the kiddos that usually speak it really well and are strong in multiple domains. So what you need to do for these kiddos is see which domain they need the most support in, the one they demonstrate less proficiency in, and start with that. So let's say that one of your intermediate kiddos scored intermediate or proficient in all of the domains except for writing. So now you know that writing is going to be the language objectives that you are going to focus on. Now, these students should be able to write paragraphs using evidence, and they should be able to use transition words. But providing sentence frames or guided support for these kiddos will really make a difference in helping them demonstrate proficiency in that area. Let's take a look at one very specific example. Let's say you want these students to explain the water cycle. For your students that are pre-emergent emergent, they're at the stage where they're able to name the stages using pictures, where your basics would be able to describe the water cycle using sentence frames, and your intermediates would be able to explain the process using academic vocabulary. It is the same lesson, but differentiated by all three levels. Now, what effective English language development instruction looks like. I've been extremely fortunate to be able to travel to different classrooms and see some incredible English language development teachers that are so effective in their practice. And what I've noticed is that in strong English language development classrooms, any classrooms for English language learners, you see four things. You see explicit language teaching, you see modeling, you see guided practice, and you see structured interaction. So let's take a look at one of the checklists for things that I look for whenever I go into a classroom. And again, the purpose of this tool is to plan, reflect, or observe instruction that supports English language learners. Now, as I stated before, if you are participating in a 2-hour or pull-out model, you are going to be the explicit language teacher. And these are things that you directly need to do to impact student learning. So the question you're going to ask yourself is, am I directly teaching the language students needs? By that, do you have a clear language objective? Are you teaching vocabulary explicitly? And are you modeling how to use language in a sentence and connecting language to the content the student are learning? Now, guided practice is something that would be beneficial for all students. And guided release is a great practice that you can incorporate inside or into your teaching practice to ensure that all students are successful in all content areas. So the first step of that would be modeling. And you're going to ask yourself, do students see and hear what success looks like? So are you modeling thinking out loud, not just giving directions? Are you providing examples of complete responses and using sentence frames when modeling? And most importantly, are you showing what to do and how to say it? Because remember, these are the students that need the most support with language. With your guided practice, I want you to think, are you supporting students before you expect independence? Meaning, Are you using those resources that you have available to be able to have students do this task independently, like sentence frames, word boxes? Are they practicing with support? Are you adjusting based on student needs? And then finally, structured student interaction. So for this, you need to ask yourself, are students actively using language, not just listening? So giving students opportunities to talk, but making sure that you provide structured talking routines so that they can do it successfully, so that students have clear roles and prompts to use while discussion. And most importantly, ensuring that all students are participating, not just a select few. Now, a quick self-check. Keep in mind, if students are mostly listening, copying, or giving one-word answers, that doesn't mean the lesson is failing. It just means they need more language support, which is where student talk comes into play. Now, in all of these domains, one of the areas where most teachers need the most support in or need to incorporate more so in their lessons is students must produce language. And student talk matters. If students are not talking, they are not developing language. And some of the intentional pieces that you can incorporate in your practice include sentence frames, partner talk, and structured discussion. So I did create a guide for you guys. Hopefully it loads. For quick student talk supports. Now, it varies depending on what it is you want your student to be doing. If they are having a discussion where you want them to agree and disagree, here are some sentence frames that they can use. I agree with because, I disagree with because. If you have a student that is a newcomer, they're going to be able to repeat after you. If you have a student that is pre-emergent emergent, it could be enough that they just say, I agree with this person. Now, one of my favorite sentence frames in there is going to be I see it differently because, which allows students to say similar, they're making their point across, just using a synonym as to agree or disagree. Now, there are a couple different kinds of sentence frames that you can incorporate, again, depending on what it is that you are asking your student to do with that specific task. But a quick teacher tip is to start small. Choose one set of frames and use them consistently for a week, and you will see the amount of growth that will change in your classroom. Now, some common misconceptions are going to be, and they're often said that EL students just need more time. And though it is important that ELs receive extra think time to process and extra time to be able to process what they're thinking before they verbally say it, if you give them more time and they are not understanding the language or they are unable to produce it, you can give them all the time in the world. They still won't be able to meet that expectation. And simplifying work is not a solution that is going to benefit these students long term. What they need is they need explicit language instruction. They need to know how to use language. So, what you can do. You do not need to change everything at once. Start small. Start incorporating or adding one language objective. Start planning one structured speaking activity. Use one sentence frame because small shifts can make big changes. You are already teaching English language learners, but now you can be more intentional with how you support them. And remember, small shifts in your instruction can lead to big impact in student success. So, thank you for your time and your work. Everything you do to support English language learners is greatly appreciated and makes such a big difference. My name is Alexandra Moya. My email is located below. And if you ever need anything, you are more than welcome to let me know. Thank you.